Where does a person go when they disappear? In a time in which there are cameras in every corner, face tracking, digital footprints, electronic border controls, how does someone just vanish? The most common reasons for disappearing are kidnapping and human trafficking, involuntary disappearances related to accidents or health issues, as well as, of course, voluntary disappearances. People who just want to fall off the radar to avoid some kind of repercussion. Global numbers show that over 1 million people are reported missing every year, most of which are eventually found within the first few weeks or months. Others, however, remain gone. The United States has the world's highest number of reported missing persons, with over 500,000 people reported missing every year. And yes, note that I am saying reports, because not every country reports how many people go missing. However, today we're not talking about the US. We're talking about a much smaller country, a country which reports about 400 missing people yearly, the country of Bulgaria, where in 2014, a 28-year-old German tourist by the name of Lars Mittank disappeared after showing bizarre behaviour during his last day on holiday there. Lars ran away from the airport he was meant to be flying home from, leaving his bags behind and climbing a fence as if his life depended on it. This seemingly voluntary disappearance made no sense to his family, who to this day still don't know where he is, if he's still alive, and what exactly he was running from. This is the bizarre disappearance of Lars Mittank. Important links regarding this case will be listed in the description. Thank you. On June 30th of 2014, 6 friends flew from Germany to Varna, a seaside city on the Bulgarian Black Sea coast. Life in Varna is centered around the sea. It's an important center for business and transportation, and a very popular tourist destination. And frequent sunshine make it a great place for a summer holiday of sitting by the pool, laying on the beach, and going out at night with friends. And that's exactly what Lars Mittank and his 5 friends were planning to do that week. Lars Joachim Mittank was born on February 9, 1986, in Berlin, the capital city of Germany. But he wouldn't stay there for long. After moving around different cities, his family finally settled in Itzehoe, where Lars grew up. Located in northern Germany near Hamburg, Itzehoe is the oldest town in the region. It was a small town with quiet neighborhoods, big streets, and many other families raising children. Lars had no trouble fitting in the community. His mother Sandra always remembers him as a free-spirited, extroverted child with an open mind and eager to make friends. He was very into football, and he was a supporter of Werder Bremen. It was his favorite team, and he never missed a match. In school, he was bright and eager to learn. All through his academic years, Lars worked hard and proved he was smart and disciplined, graduating with excellent grades. He quickly found a job at a power plant about 150 kilometers away from his hometown, so he packed his bags and moved away. The distance, however, never interfered with Lars and his family. The Mittank family was close, and despite being over an hour away from them, Lars spoke to his family constantly and took any chance he had in the weekends to visit. Things were going well. Lars was moving up in his job, proving he was smart and hardworking. He also had a girlfriend. They had been together for several years in a healthy relationship. However, despite things looking up for Lars, his whole world was turned upside down in 2012 when his father had a stroke. Lars rushed home every chance he had to help his mother take care of his father, and spend as much time as he could with him. For Lars, family always came first. In 2014, 2 years after his father had his stroke, Lars was feeling overwhelmed. He had been going from work to his family home and then back to work for months, worried about his father and being there for his mother as much as he could. He was exhausted, especially as someone who loved to spend time outdoors. Lars often took fishing and hiking trips with friends, spending days at a time out in nature. But most of all, Lars Mittank was a traveller. The time spent caring for his father hadn't left him much time to explore other cities and countries as much as he wanted to. So in the summer of 2014, Lars and his friends decided it was time to take a well-deserved break, packed their bags, and booked a holiday to Bulgaria. What was intended to be a trip to relieve the stress of his family situation sadly became the last time anyone would ever see or hear from Lars again. Traveling around Europe is relatively easy, especially for Germans. Being located in Central Europe, Germany makes it very quick to hop from one country to another in just a couple of hours of flying. Some of Lars's friends were planning a week-long trip to Varna, a coastal city in Bulgaria, to take in the sunshine and good weather. Lars was more of an adventure vacation type of person, but after the past months, he needed to clear his head, and this trip felt like the perfect way to do it. So he decided to join his 5 friends for a chill holiday of sunshine and partying. On June 30th, the group arrived at Varna and checked into the Viva Club Hotel, a seaside resort close to the beaches and nightclubs that are so popular for summer tourists. For the first few days, all was going according to plan. The group would chill out in the pool or the beach during the day and head out for dinner, drinks, and clubbing at night. On July 5th, the group went to a nearby bar for food and drinks. That was the summer of the Brazil World Cup, so while they were at the bar, they joined local and tourists in watching the quarterfinal match between Costa Rica and the Netherlands. The night overall was fun. They watched the match, partied, and had a good time cheering on teams with other fans. However, like it can sometimes happen when football and alcohol are mixed, they got into a fight. A group of German Bayern Munich fans were also taking a holiday in Varna, and from across the bar, they spotted Lars wearing his Werder Bremen shirt. The two groups got into an argument to the point where the Munich group threatened them about how easy it was to hire someone for murder in Bulgaria. The fight didn't escalate any further though, and everyone went back to enjoying their night. Lars and his friends stayed at the bar until 4 a.m, and after leaving, some of his friends suggested getting some food at a nearby McDonald's that was open all night. Lars said he wasn't hungry and he wanted to go to bed, so he decided to make his way back to the hotel on his own. The walk to the hotel was just a few minutes, but as he was walking, Lars felt he wasn't alone. Soon enough, a group of men surrounded him and out of nowhere began attacking him. To this day, it's unclear if they were Bulgarian or Russian, since Lars wasn't able to understand them properly. But the men pushed Lars around while threatening him, and at one point, they hit him on the head. Lars made a run for it and actually made it back to the hotel safely. The next morning, he woke up at noon and spoke to his girlfriend on the phone. He told her all about the fight with the Russians or Bulgarians who had attacked him. And from the first moment he talked about it, Lars was convinced it had been the Germans at the bar who had orchestrated the hit, since they had repeatedly threatened him and his friends. His girlfriend was worried about the blow he had received to the side of the head, especially when Lars told her his ear was hurting. She asked him to get it checked out by a doctor to rule out any serious injuries, but Lars didn't want to, and he decided to let the wound heal itself and carry on with his holiday. The next day went by with no incidents. Lars and his friends went to the beach, chilled by the pool, and went out at night for drinks. But on July 7th, the day they were supposed to fly back to Germany, Lars started worrying about his injury. His ear was still bothering him, and he started to get concerned about flying. The changes in pressure could seriously damage his eardrum and affect his hearing if not treated correctly. So after checking out of the hotel and before heading to the airport, he and one of his friends took a taxi to a doctor's office. The doctor diagnosed him with a ruptured eardrum and strongly advised him not to fly. In fact, he told Lars to go to a hospital to run further tests and get some treatment, since the injury was quite severe. By this time, their flight was getting close, so Lars made the decision to stay in Varna to get his ear checked out properly, and he told his friends to fly back home without him. And this is where things start spiraling out of control. As his friends made their way to the airport to fly back to Germany, Lars got into a taxi and arrived at the hospital he had been referred to at around 8 p.m. After being examined by a specialist, he was not admitted to the hospital, but his injury was enough to get him a prescription for Zefprezil, a common antibiotic used for ear infections. An hour later, with his prescription in hand, he jumped into the same taxi that had taken him to the hospital and visited a couple of pharmacies to pick up his prescription. By this time, he needed a place to sleep, so he asked the driver to take him to a cheap hotel. July is peak summer holiday season, so finding an empty cheap room wasn't easy. And so Lars ended up at Hotel Color, a cheap accommodation in a rougher area of the city, and this is where Lars Mittank's mysterious behaviour begins. Lars became hyper-aware of everyone around him. He was convinced that there were men around the hotel that seemed to be looking for him. He checked into the Hotel Color and paid for a single room with his credit card. Once he was checked in, he had some water at the hotel bar to take his medication, and then he headed up to his room. At 11 p.m., Lars's paranoia was starting to escalate, so he called his mother, Sandra, and told her all about the events of the past couple of days. The fight at the bar, the attack from the unknown men that caused his injury, and how he was stranded in Varna, unable to fly back. Sandra listened to her son and became very worried, so she started looking at alternative ways of bringing Lars back home through his travel health insurance. However, the health insurance wasn't able to help them, since it didn't cover the cost in this case. This made Lars even more anxious, and his desire to leave Bulgaria just grew. He needed to get out of the country. On another call with his mother that night, he told her he had the feeling the hotel had stolen his card information. There was no proof of this, but to attempt to calm her son, Sandra cancelled Lars's card, since he insisted he had plenty of cash, and then, since he was unable to fly, she booked him a bus out of Varna for the night of July 8th, on the next day. However, none of this seemed to be calming Lars down. Past midnight, Lars called his mother again, noticeably more agitated. He kept mentioning the hotel was off, he felt someone was listening in on him, and he needed to get out. It was midnight by then, and Sandra didn't understand where Lars wanted to go, so she insisted he stayed in the room and waited until morning to check out. However, at 2 a.m., she received another call from Lars, and he told her he was being followed, and some men wanted to kill him. Then he hung up and went quiet for a while. But contact resumed quickly, via text message, when Lars asked his mother to look up what Zefprezil 500 was, the medicine he had been prescribed. After a night of confusion and paranoia, Sandra was understandably scared, and regardless of whether the threats to his life were real or not, she knew Lars was not okay and he had to get back home. So despite concerns about his eardrum, she booked her son a flight out of Varna for 4 p.m. on July 8th. At 5 a.m., Lars hopped into a taxi and asked to be taken to the airport. A witness later claimed his pupils were very dilated when getting into the taxi, and it definitely seemed he was on something. Once at the airport, though, Lars was seen walking in with his bags in a seemingly calm state, but his erratic behaviour continued soon after arriving. Lars went to the Western Union counter and asked about money transfers, since he had no credit card available. He called his mother and asked her for money. Sandra was very worried, since she didn't understand why Lars needed money when he was flying back in just a few hours, and he had claimed he had enough cash. Regardless, she sent him €500, and she also asked him to stop by the airport's medical office to get his ear checked out once again. If the doctor didn't clear him to fly, he would catch the bus she had booked for him that night. One way or another, Lars was getting out of Varna in just a few hours. A few minutes went by and Sandra called Lars again to check if he had gone to the doctor's or not. However, Lars answered with a cryptic whisper Sandra couldn't understand, and very quickly he hung up the call and didn't pick up his phone again. This is the last contact mother and son had before Lars disappeared without a trace. So what happened after Sandra, Lars's mother, lost contact with him, and these haunting images of Lars running for his life? Well, this is where details begin to get lost. At around 9 a.m, Dr. Costa from the airport's medical office confirmed that Lars made it into his examination room. For about 40 minutes, Dr. Costa examined Lars and gave him some eardrops and pills. Throughout the entire consultation, Lars was restless and kept fidgeting with his hands. Just like the hospital had said before, the doctor suggested Lars should wait a few days before he got on a plane. Lars refused to take the pills and insisted on flying. He was nervous, agitated, and even muttered that he had to get out of there. Seeing that he was insisting so much, Dr. Costa told Lars if he wanted to fly, he would have to sign a waiver, since he was not fit to fly safely and could suffer from a much more serious injury if he did. But during that examination, something else happened. About half an hour into Lars's visit to the doctor's office, CCTV cameras outside the medical center caught a glimpse of a man in a uniform going into the doctor's office. The man was a construction worker and was wearing the appropriate airport employee uniform. But while Lars was sitting with the doctor, the man accidentally opened the door of the consultation room, and according to Dr. Costa, Lars became highly agitated and upset when he saw him. He tried to calm him down, telling him it was only an airport employee. At the time, Varna Airport was in the middle of an upgrade and construction workers were in and out all the time, and sometimes they accidentally walked into rooms they shouldn't. But Lars didn't calm down, he just got more and more nervous. After the examination was over, Lars Mittank signed that waiver and whispered he needed to use the restroom, but instead, he ran. Lars ran out of the airport building, and once outside he slowed down for a moment, deciding which direction to go. He then started running again, northwest across the parking lot. From there, multiple witnesses saw him climbing the 8-foot fence with barbed wire that marked the end of the airport. And once on the other side of the fence, Lars made it to a sunflower field where the tall plants made it difficult to spot him for much longer. In just a few seconds, Lars couldn't be seen anymore. Sandra Mittank called and called, but no one was picking up on the other side. Frustrated because she was so far from her son, and after witnessing his odd behaviour the past 24 hours, she immediately called the German consulate in Bulgaria for help, and it wouldn't take long to see what happened. Through a series of calls, the consulate told Sandra about Lars's escape from the airport, leaving all of his belongings behind. His last steps were very well traced thanks to his constant contact with his mother, as well as the doctor's visits. The Bulgarian police brought search dogs to the airport and the sunflower field, but they found no sign of Lars. Searching his luggage, police found no trace of drugs or anything that suggested Lars was mixed in something bigger. Only the medication the doctors had prescribed for his ear injury. The medication he was hesitant to take. So after he ran out of the airport, it was like finding a needle in a haystack. On July 9th, a missing persons report was filed in Germany, and a Facebook group was opened to make tips and information easier to recover. Lars's mum could also not sit in Germany and wait for news, so she made arrangements for someone to care for her husband and got on a flight to Varna. Sandra Mittank did absolutely everything a desperate mother could. With the help of friends and some other German travelers who happened to be in the area at the time, they handed out flyers, put up posters all over town with the picture of 28-year-old Lars. Sandra visited hospitals and morgues, fearful of finding her son's lifeless body. But instead, she found nothing. There was simply nothing pointing in the direction of Lars, or any clues that could help understand what happened to him. In Sandra's own words, "It's like the earth swallowed him up." The search continued for days in Varna, where family and friends quickly realized how different Bulgaria was to their native Germany. Large parts of the country are very poor, including the area surrounding Varna airport. In 2014, a lot of people didn't have smartphones or went online that often, so they weren't keeping up with daily news. The online petitions for help to find Lars that seemed to make the search more agile were actually useless in a population that didn't go online that frequently. Rural areas in Bulgaria have many abandoned houses and stables on the wide open land. Some locals make a living by collecting berries, herbs, and mushrooms and sell them in town. So if he had decided to hide there, it would be possible for Lars to survive. And considering the lack of online presence in the community, it's not that hard to believe that people who had seen or helped him had no clue he was a missing person. In fact, after the search had begun, some of the rural police stations had not been informed about this case. Bulgarian media also didn't make a big story out of it. A few reports were scattered on the news and in newspapers after he went missing, but there wasn't anywhere near enough of a story to cause national interest in the case, especially since Bulgaria relies heavily on tourism for economic growth. A story like this would have had an impact on the country's image, potentially driving other tourists away for safety concerns. So despite their best efforts, it was very hard to spread the news that Lars Mittank was missing and that his loved ones were desperately searching for him. Unfortunately, after weeks, the search revealed nothing, not even a clue as to what his next movements were after he climbed that fence, and no sign of his body if he had been killed. Eventually, Sandra had to return to Germany to resume care of her husband, but she did it with the feeling that her son was still out there. She just couldn't find him. Sandra traveled to Bulgaria as often as she could, and even hired a private detective who kept in contact and followed up on every lead they could find. At the end of September, 3 people claimed to have seen a man fitting Lars's description in the Varna area in the following days after July 8th, one of them even confirming he had given Lars a ride on his truck. Further investigation confirmed the man these witnesses had seen was almost definitely Lars Mittank. However, his tracks disappeared very quickly after that, only confirming Lars had been alive for the next few days after he disappeared, but not pointing in the direction where he had gone next after the ride on the truck. A reward of 40,000 euros was put up for any information that would lead to the discovery of Lars. His mom Sandra continued to believe he was still out there. Her son was smart, athletic, and resourceful. Whatever he was facing, he would have been able to pull through. However, time seemed to stop for the investigation as leads dried up and Lars's footsteps vanished completely. As of the making of this video in 2024, Lars has been missing for almost 10 years. Like in many other missing persons cases, there have been numerous potential sightings that have given the family hope. The Facebook page is still up and running, actively keeping the search going, and over the past decade it has received numerous tips. And although none of them have returned Lars to his family, they have helped locate other missing people along the way. In December of 2015, people spotted a homeless man in Bulgaria that had a resemblance to Lars. In fact, when approached, it turned out the man spoke German and English. However, the man wasn't sure where he was from, and when his picture was sent to the Mittank family, they confirmed it was not him. Another man resembling Lars was spotted in Varna speaking German and confused as to how he had ended up there. However, when investigated further, the man was confirmed to be a Polish missing person who was thankfully returned to his loved ones. For the past decade, the search for Lars has been able to locate 15 other German men who, for different reasons, had disappeared. Many families were able to be reunited with their loved ones thanks to the thorough search Lars's family has been leading, and with the help of the supportive online community. In December of 2016, a very promising tip got the family's hope up once again. A man who claimed to be Canadian but very strongly resembled Lars Mittank was discovered in Brazil. His blonde hair and facial structure were incredibly similar to the missing Germans. Unfortunately, when the Brazilian police investigated further, they discovered the man's blood type and eye color were different. And this was not Lars. His name was Anton. He was a Canadian man who had been missing for 5 years. Anton left his home area in 2012. He suffered from schizophrenia, and after he fled Canada, he somehow managed to hitchhike his way all the way across North and South America and ended up in Brazil. Lars Mittank's loved ones were disappointed that Anton turned out not to be Lars, but this incredible story convinced them even harder that Lars was possibly still alive. And so, they're still looking for him. With no information about Lars's possible location, there have been numerous theories about his whereabouts and what drove him to run away like that. All of these come from a place of speculation, although some do seem to match Lars's behaviour in the last few hours before he ran. Initially, the first thought that many had was that Lars simply wanted to disappear, that he wanted to stay in Bulgaria and go off the grid. Perhaps something in his life had pushed him to want to start from scratch. This theory, however, doesn't sit well with those who knew him best. Lars was very close to his family. He was in a stable relationship with his partner and had constant contact with his friends. In fact, he was there on holiday with them. Despite the pressure of taking care of his father after his stroke, it made no sense to his loved ones that he would just disappear voluntarily, especially since his last known hours were spent in constant contact with his mother. This theory simply didn't stand on its own. So the next theory investigators considered had to do with Lars being forced to become a drug mule against his will. The theory was that the Bulgarian or Russian gang he encountered on the night of July 5th forced him to become a mule by making him ingest drugs. When searched, his luggage showed no traces of drugs, so perhaps he was carrying them on him or even inside him. That would explain why he got nervous talking to the doctor and seeing another man entering the room. Some even believed his erratic behaviour the night before was consistent with perhaps one of the bags he had ingested tearing open. This theory, however, also has a lot of flaws. Lars had been in contact with his girlfriend and his mother, explaining his concerns and the threats he had received. His paranoia and the feeling that he was being chased was openly communicated to them. Had he been an actual drug mule, he wouldn't have given his mother so much information. Lars was also not in need of any money. He had a good job, his family was comfortable. He wasn't desperate for cash, which means he would have been forced into being a mule after a fight in the bar. But none of this is really consistent with other cases of drug mules and how these type of operations are usually run. Lastly, if he had ingested a bag of drugs and it had torn open, he would have likely overdosed, not just been paranoid like he was. And so, with the drug mule story not making much sense, conversations about human trafficking emerged. Bulgaria has one of the highest rates of human trafficking in Europe. Many people have known to be kidnapped and forced into a life of drug smuggling or sex work, and even organ trafficking. Lars was a fit and healthy young man, which some believed may have made him a target in the organ black market. Although this is a possibility, it doesn't match the behaviour Lars was showing, nor did it match the claims he was making. Had this been the case, Lars would have probably spoken up about it in the conversations with his mother, or even told his friends to go to the police. Which brings us to the last and probably most likely theory, that Lars suffered some kind of mental breakdown. Mental health problems can be very difficult to interpret since every person can show different signs of distress. However, Lars's constant paranoia, the lack of trust to what professional doctors were prescribing, and the feeling that he was being watched are all signs that point to some kind of psychotic breakdown. A psychotic breakdown triggers symptoms of psychosis, making the patient lose touch with reality. This can materialize in the person's mind in the form of hallucinations, delusion, and paranoia, to the point of becoming irrationally suspicious of family, friends, or, in this case, doctors. Lars thought someone wanted to kill him, but he couldn't be specific on who or why. Prior to this, Lars had never exhibited signs of schizophrenia or other mental illnesses, but regardless of that, anyone can suffer a psychotic breakdown, and it can often be difficult to determine exactly what triggered it. The question whether the prescription of cefprozil could have triggered the breakdown has been brought up, but it's very unlikely. After searching his luggage, it was obvious that Lars had only taken a couple of the pills. The side effects of this antibiotic are mostly headaches or nausea, and even in that case, they're not that common. But there is something that specialists believe that may have helped trigger that breakdown, and it's the head trauma he received on the night of July 5th, when his eardrum was ruptured. In some cases, a blow to the head like the one Lars experienced can bring hallucinations, personality change, and paranoia, and it was approximately a day and a half after his injury when Lars started exhibiting this odd behaviour, which gives this theory something to stand on. We could sit down and discuss all the theories in the world about what happened to Lars Mittank and why he ran out of the airport that day. However, none of these theories will ever explain why Lars completely vanished from the face of the planet on July 8th of 2014. None of these theories can bring comfort to a family who has spent the last decade glued to the phone and the computer, just waiting for a sign, any sign, that can confirm that Lars is still out there, somewhere, waiting to be found. All of the details about how to identify Lars and who to contact in case of any information are in the description. Please keep your eyes open, and if you think you have valuable information that can contribute to this case, bring it to the authorities. Thank you so much for watching another video. Please make sure to give it a like and subscribe if you want to watch more videos like this one. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.